So the brain is constantly under attack by these foods that put calories and oils into the bloodstream, right? Increasing risk of depression, anxiety, the alteration in brain structure, right? Causing inflammation in the body and the brain. And of course, here we're talking about, there's a link between our behavior and what we eat. I mean, obviously, we're seeing increased risk of people involved in crime if they have more candy as a child. So this is a study that showed that children who were fed candy in the highest quintile of candy or fast food consumption before age of 10, were 60% of them were arrested in the highest quintile, in the highest fifth of candy consumption, that 60% were arrested by the time they were 35 years old for a violent crime or drug-related offense. It's shocking here that the most sugar giving your kids, and what do parents do? They're addicts themselves, and addicts divorce from their conscious mind the danger of what they're doing. They don't think that eating donuts is so dangerous now, right? A fried food with sugar, right? What's a donut? Sugar, flour, fried in oil. The whole formula for it's a drug. It's made to be a drug on the brain when you eat a donut. So what do the parents do? They bring donuts to their kids playing soccer games, right? They're poisoning their children. And to the extent they do that, it derails the health of the future of the child, but it also derails the human potential of that child, their intelligence, their economic viability, their degree to be happy and healthy in life. The brain is no longer as stable. The brain can be more agitated and violent and angered and more narcissistically consumed just because the way they're feeding their children. But parents love their children so much, they make them wear their seatbelts and brush their teeth at night, and they have no idea that these foods are causing the future destruction of their children. We celebrate this with the Halloween and holidays and birthdays and bringing, cupcakes and stuffing chemically drugged substances into the bodies of children. And no other variable, not poverty, not social isolation, being raised in orphanages, the lack of parents, nothing has a robust correlation with criminal behavior and lack of emotional stability in life, as does consumption of candy and fast food in childhood. You got to be insane to eat fast food. But of course, the point is saying it makes you insane. And then people can't get rid of this degree of insanity. They can't really get rid of their addiction. They become alcohol, because obviously the consumption of fast food leads to alcoholism. The first drugs kids are raised on are the sugar and candy they're eating and all the processed foods they're eating as a kid. And those act as a drug on the brain. They want to get into harder chemical stimulants like alcohol in high school, and they move on to that, to more serious drugs. And so that we're saying that, food, or becoming a food addict, is the gateway drug to more serious drug abuse. And many Americans only make it from food abuse to alcohol abuse. They don't really make it to the drug abuse phase of it, though many of them start smoking and drinking. But then they can't experience what it's like to feel normally, because we're talking here about during digestion. You have two phases of digestion. You have the anabolic phase and the catabolic phase, right? So you have the anabolic phase, means you're eating at the moment and you're digesting the food. The catabolic phase means that you're burning off what you just ate. And I'm saying here that most detox and most healing and most repair takes place during the catabolic phase when we're not eating food. If we're eating and digesting all the time, we're aging rapidly. And the best time to extend your catabolic phase so you can heal and repair is to not eat a heavy meal before bedtime, to eat earlier in the day, to finish dinner by 6 o'clock. So you have 4 hours before you go to bed. So you can go to bed at an empty stomach and sleep at night in the catabolic phase. So the body can do more repair and healing when you're not digesting food. Most Americans, though, they want to stay in the anabolic phase because they can't stand the discomfort of the catabolic phase, because they get shaky and weak and feel fatigued when they stop digesting food, because they're feeling fatigued from the flood of toxins that circulate in the bloodstream for removal when they're not digesting food. So let me make this clear here. What I'm saying is that if you follow this curve going up, the glucose curve going up when you're eating and after you eat, that when the digestion of that meal is completed, you go into the detox part of the catabolic phase, And people don't feel well because their body is so toxic. They start to feel shaky and weak and headachy and fatigued, and they have to eat to keep their energy up. They have to overeat to keep their energy up because their body is toxic. So diets of all description can't work, and they won't work because people have an unrelenting and overwhelming desire to eat because it makes them feel better, because they feel poorly when they're not eating all the time or not digesting all the time. So they can either have to eat too frequently, or they have to eat heavy meals with meat and cheese and to keep their digestive tract going for hours and hours and hours, so they don't ever enter the catabolic phase. And they can't lose weight because you don't really burn much fat until half of the catabolic phase is passed, and your glycogen stores are starting to decrease. Your body's going to preferentially burn glycogen until it starts dipping into the fat reserves in any substantial nature. But most people are eating as a result of withdrawal, not because of true hunger. They've lost a connection with true hunger. True hunger would occur when the glycogen stores have been depleted, and the body can turn the glucose from the meal into glycogen, and then we burn them with no food coming in. We burn off the glycogen and turn it back into glucose again. And that's during the catabolic phase when we're burning down that glycogen. When the glycogen is mostly burned down, we're burning glycogen and fat, and then we're starting to burn mostly fat and less glycogen. And eventually we need some more glucose because the brain can only function on glucose, not on fat. So the body gets hungry then. And real hunger is felt in the upper part of the chest, like the lower part of the neck and the neck and throat here, where hunger is felt. And it doesn't make you feel fatigued or headachy. It's not that uncomfortable. You can go function with hunger, and not a big deal. If you continued not to eat, of course, the glucose curve would not even drop because you would break down muscle tissue to make glucose for the brain's function. So the body can make more glucose by breaking down muscle tissue because the brain needs to function on glucose. But you think the body wants to break down muscles to get more energy? No, the body doesn't want to. It would prefer you eat. And the signal of hunger, see what I'm saying is, we get instinctual drive to eat the right amount of calories. And true hunger directs us to the precise amount of calories we need to maintain our muscle mass, but not to put fat on the body. You can't put fat on the body if you're eating in response to true hunger. You can only have put fat on the body if you're eating outside of the demands of true hunger. Either you're recreationally eating when you're not hungry, or you're eating in response to toxic hunger. If you eat when you're really hungry, you can never get overweight. There are no overweight deer and coyotes and squirrels and monkeys running around the woods and the jungles. Every animal eats the right amount of food because they're eating natural foods. And if we lived in the jungle or the forest eating natural foods, we couldn't be overweight either. We're overweight because we're eating foodless foods that make our body toxic and then make us not feel okay unless we overeat. And in order to feel okay, we've got to change what we're eating, and we've got to get these addictive substances, which people call food, right? I always say, food, never touch that stuff, right? I don't eat food. Of course, I'm not eating what other consider food. I eat real food. I spell the word food backwards and call it doof because those things aren't food, and you have to see them as being the toxic drugs that they are. When you're walking through the airport and you're seeing those cookies and pretzels and burgers and things that they're serving food to people, you got to see that as drugs. They're serving you drugs on the airplane, and everybody around you is eating chips and bags and cookies and all kinds of drug-like foods that don't sustain human life. So the later phase of their life, after the age of 60, they become a medical wreck. What's the point of living if you're in pain and suffering and you have no quality of life? No one chooses to be overweight and sickly. They do it because of the food they're eating makes them changes who they are and changes their personality and their desires and needs. And they need to overeat to feel okay. So toxic hunger leads to overeating behaviors that can't be controlled. And we're saying here that the buildup of toxic hunger is from the buildup of toxicosis, from the increased levels of these toxins in the human tissues, from the lack of consumption of phytochemical-rich food. So in order to get rid of toxicosis and toxic hunger and to be comfortable eating less calories, you have to start to flood the body with high nutrient calories, particularly though eating sufficiently from greens and beans and nuts and onions and mushrooms and berries and seeds. We have to eat real food so the body gets real nutrients, right? So we're talking here that headaches and weakness and stomach cramping and a growling stomach and being irritable, withdrawal, depression, anxiety from sugar, all these things are not hunger. The symptoms that most people think that are hunger are not hunger. They're demonstrative of their diet not being adequate and their body weight being elevated. Because real hunger is felt in the upper part of the chest, in the mouth and throat. So you have to get rid of toxic hunger by eating enough healthy food to get in control of your appetite. And diets don't work because people are trying to willy-nilly cut back on calories instead of seeking sufficient volume and nutrients. In other words, you have to sink nutrients in what you're eating for the body to get rid of its toxic load for your diet, to be back in touch with instinctual hunger. So you have to eat high volume, high nutrient foods and a sufficient amount of them. So for example, I want people to learn to repeat and model a healthy diet day in and day out, and repeat the right behavior. That means a person looking to lose weight should be eating a large salad every day for lunch with a significant bowl of vegetable bean soup and a piece of fruit for dessert. Eat a substantial lunch, right?